All good. Okay, it has gone 9 o'clock. I welcome everyone to our council meeting on the 31st of March 2022, and I will open with Karakia for us. Dear God, thank you for bringing us all together today to make decisions on behalf of our community. There's so much going on here and up the coast and to the west, so much in our community, so much need. So we ask you, God, to please guide us in our decision making today, and that we take into account there are so many lives affected. Thank you for all your blessings, God. Amen. Okay, people, we have one massive day ahead of us. I'm just going to quickly run you through some practicalities because I need your help today. I cannot do this alone. I need you to work with me today. So first of all, apologies. Can anyone tell me if there are apologies? I cannot see.
Your Worship, we have a couple of other councillors just being set up in another room and will join us shortly.
Okay, I'm just wondering if I should wait because I do need everyone to hear what I'm saying. Otherwise, I'm just going to repeat it and some people might not be aware then because I only want to say it once.
Morning. Well, here one. I should drag that around here and now the bloody thing's gone out.
Hey Bill, I'm just going to ask everyone to mute themselves if they're not speaking. Thank you. I can mute you, Bill.
Morning.
Morning. Okay, we're going to go, people. We've got a big day ahead of us today. So I want to, before we move into our agenda, just want to make sure we are
unmute. Yeah.
Seriously, people, please mute yourselves. I am going to just ask today, we have big agenda items, which I'm sure everyone would like to have a say at, but I cannot allow everyone to have a say today at all of our papers. So I please ask you today, I'm not going to run standing orders, but I've been very generous because I know there's quite a disconnect when we meet via Zoom. So people do want to have a say and connect. And I'm just going to ask today, please be mindful and allow others to have a say as well. We have a big agenda ahead of us. And then just going to our sheet of the day, our running sheet, the agenda item 2280, which is the Tipu presentation, I have invited them to come at 11:15, just to give them surety of time. So we will break then, have a quick presentation there. So without further ado, I'm going to move on to apologies. I don't see any apologies. What I'm going to ask of you, if you want to communicate, please make sure you write it in the chat box. If you want to talk to me, you need to text me. I cannot keep track of the chat box. So if you want to talk to me, text me. Otherwise, communication in the chat box. Please be mindful that this is live streamed. Welcome to everyone listening to us today. And if we're going to vote, like always, can you please use your physical hand to vote like this so I can see it? But when you want to ask a question, please use the little yellow hand. Okay, declarations of interest today. I can't see any hands up. So we are going to move to the confirmation of our minutes, which is on page 5. Councillors, please go to page 5. Take a good look. This was our last meeting, relative short minutes. Any questions or queries? If not, I'm going to ask for a mover. Moved by Councillor Hughes, seconded by Councillor Seymour. All in favour, hands up. Thank you, carried. I take you to the action sheet. Just the next page, so take a look. Larry.
Yeah, thank you. Just 17.1, Council to be provided with information and timeframes around the number of buildings that will require earthquake strengthening. it was dated that we'd have received some information from MPT on the 1st of February, but we haven't received anything as yet. So just inquiring when that information will come through, please.
Thank you. Can we please make a note and get back to councillors on that one? Thank you for that, Councillor Foster. No leave of absence. So today there are 2 acknowledgements I would like to make under our acknowledgement and tribute. So first of all, the wonderful Sir Wera Gardner. This is the first time that we meet face to face or Zoom to Zoom to acknowledge the passing of Sir Wera. It was an honour and a privilege to know him personally. He touched my life. He was such a kind and warm gentleman, and I know he touched so many other lives in his work. And for those of you that didn't know Sir Wera, he was, aside from being a wonderful and a respected public servant, he was also a decorated soldier. And he also wrote lots of books. But most of all, he was Hikia's husband and dad to his wonderful kids, and a koro to his moko. So we just want to acknowledge his passing today and send all our love to Hikia and the extended whānau. And then, unfortunately, I just read in the news that Mohana Jackson has passed away this morning. So for those of you that don't know, Mohana was a lawyer specialising in constitutional law and international Indigenous issues from Ngāti Kahungunu and Ngāti Porou descent. So we just also extend our condolences to his family. Okay, councillors, we move on to public input and deputations. Nothing for today, no extraordinary business, no notice of motion or adjourned business. So I take you to page 10, and I want to thank Donna for this paper. This has been a massive journey that Donna has been on. Please do not mute me. So I don't know where I was muted, so I'll just start again. So this is a paper that Donna has written. It has been a journey walking alongside the RSA to come to this paper to allow them and us to appoint trustees to then deal with the issues highlighted in the paper. So I will open the floor for any questions. Donna is sitting here with me if you have any questions. Tony.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, I would love to move this paper. Always like a good bit of legal issue and resolution. And Donna, well done. This certainly has been a long and fraught journey, but it's great that we're where we're at now, and I'm really happy to move this paper.
Thank you for that. Josh.
I'm happy to second it, Your Worship.
Cool. Andy? Oh, you're muted, my friend.
Not sure where the responsibilities lie, but it's no secret that RSA's right throughout the country have been struggling for quite a long time with membership. And I know they went through a change here where just servicemen and women were admitted. But I see in clause 4, it's got the membership of the trustees only to ex-servicemen or servicewomen, but their membership is actually open to anyone over 18 now. So I don't know if it's overly restrictive having that clause in there, clause 4, which says that they have to be ex-servicemen or ex-servicewomen, because I know from other centres around the country that the membership is a real struggle for them, and whether they're putting impositions on themselves by having that clause there.
Thank you. Donna.
Thank you, Councillor Cranston. I know the trust deed can only be changed by the trust, so we need to appoint the trustees first. And so I would expect if it was going to be an issue, then we would appoint as many trustees as we can. And then I think there's a number of things in that trust deed that they would want to look at. If we don't do it before we appoint trustees, or if we want to change anything before we appoint trustees, we have to apply to the court. So we'd rather avoid that.
Yeah, I kind of thought it would be on them, but just wondered whether it had been a topic of conversation, whether they were going to address that or not. No, okay, fine.
Thank you for that. Okay, I do have a mover and a seconder on this paper. If there are no more questions in regards to paper 2252, mover Councillor Robinson, seconder Councillor Wharehinga, all in favour, hands up. Contrary, carried. Thank you. Thank you, Donna. Thank you. We now move on to our paper on the draft changes to speed limit bylaw, page 47. Okay, let's keep that cracking. Who will be speaking to this paper? Is it Tina? Thank you, Tina. I'll allow you just to give us some highlights, and then we will have questions from councillors. Thank you, Tina.
Thank you. Yeah, we're just introducing this draft amended speed limit bylaw and its statement of proposal, which we need to adopt for consultation. We've got public consultation due middle of next week, 6th of April. So the maps in this bylaw include the existing 2013 bylaw maps A and the proposed maps B to describe the speed limit changes. We're using Social Pinpoint to consult with, so that's another map system. So the maps aren't quite right yet. We're still working on those, and eventually the bylaw maps will match that Social Pinpoint look. So they're a little bit messy at the moment. We need to consult as a bylaw under the 2017 rule until the new 2022 speed rule is approved, which is, they say, is going to be improved in Q2 this year, but it's been pushed out due to various consultation and things that slowed that down. And the feeling was that we couldn't keep waiting for that rule to do the speed management plan, and so we're doing it as a bylaw. So I hope it's all clear for you.
Thank you for that, Tina. Okay, I see a few hands up. Councillor Dowsing and then Councillor Worsnop. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm just happy to move the paper. All read well, and I think we've had most of this information in the past. So,
Councillor Worsnop. Thank you, Councillor Dowsing.
Thank you. My question was just around what happens. So some of the proposals around specifically what's related to school areas are, it's mentioned because the limit in the wider area of that school is proposed to be higher, but there's schools that aren't mentioned in here because we're proposing that the speed limit broadly around them will also be lower. What happens if the feedback for those areas around the schools is not supportive? Do those schools then get added to this specific designated area? Yeah, sorry, that's hopefully it's not too confusing a question.
Chris, I might leave that to Chris because it's.
Yeah, I had a feeling you might. Under those circumstances, which we've I think it's most likely under those circumstances that we would, as you've highlighted, go back, consider a specific limit for the outside the school area. But we're under obviously a strong push from central government to adopt the speeds that have been produced by this matrix. So there's tension both ways. So that would need to be carefully considered through the hearings process. If we were to decide against the broader limit, definitely going down the road of a particular limit outside the school.
Thank you.
Councillor Wharehinga, Hughes, Seymour, and then myself.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I'm also happy to second this paper as well, considering that it's something that that we're scoping up in order to be able to go out and consult with our community about. If I'm looking at it with that lens, I'm happy with the content of what is in there, and I'm happy with these being the things that we engage our community about. As we all know, our community will come back to us with some curveballs and with some great ideas and stuff, and and things will go, hey, actually we should be implementing that those things in regards to this. And I'm actually looking forward to that process. I really enjoyed the community feedback part of our hearings process. Thanks very much for the paper. Happy to second.
Councillor Hughes.
Oh yeah, I just wanted to confirm the hearing process. I see that it runs from 6th of April to 9th of May. So that will be a public consultation as well, on top of the public consultation we've already had.
So the hearing process is on the 29th of June to align. I think that's when, is it the dog bylaws being done, Chris? Yeah. So the public consultation runs for this next month. Yeah, from the 6th to the 9th of May. Yeah.
Okay, and that's on top of what happened before. So a new proposal has been drafted from the feedback previously given in the last proposal.
Great.
Okay, awesome.
Councillor Seymour.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On page 58, it does suggest that the speed limit changes have been sense checked and that they've been engaged with the communities as a whole. Can someone tell me when that happened? I mean, I appreciate that's a substantial paper, but I don't know of that happening in my ward. It's the paragraph just before the blue box at the bottom of page 58.
Yeah. So after the initial engagement, we basically, when I say sense checked, the automated calculated speeds that we get given by Waka Kotahi, some of them are a bit weird. So we just have to go through and check that they're not wrong for some reason, and we go into the data in the background and fix things up. So there's that kind of sense checking, and then there's also obviously just going through all the RFSs and with our township team, talking to them and their feedback from their communities, with what everything that we've got on hand, basically just checking that it all makes sense, and it's just arriving at that hopefully balanced position to go out with.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. So it's really taking feedback that you've got in the house already, rather than large community meetings that you've had to get to this point. And maybe community meetings will happen with the next round of consultation. Is that what's likely to happen?
Yes.
Thanks very much. Now, and in the document somewhere, I did read that they would be introduced over a period of time, I think. I just wondered how we're going to choose the process that would bring them into effect. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll have to get back to you on that one. We've basically got a 3-year period to under the NLTP to carry this work out. That's priority-wise. We've got some that are more pressing than others, and also some that align with our work programs. So we've already got some traffic calming, being carried out in Stout Street, for example. So that would probably be aligned with that. That's
right. Thank you very much for that. I really appreciate it. It's quite a substantial paper, so thanks for the work. But maybe we could plan, when we do go out to the communities, to share that kind of information with them, because otherwise we end up with an expectation that these changes are going to happen quite quickly. And if they're going to happen over 3 years, maybe we should share that as part of our consultation, so that we don't have, which the Mayor and I are seeing in relation to Stout Street, emails saying, why has this taken so long? So the public have an understanding that these new changes will be over a longer period of time. Could we note that, please?
Yeah.
Thanks very much. Appreciate that.
Okay, Tina, I just have a quick question. When you look at these, you can't help but go to your own road. And I see that Matokitoki Valley Road is off the list. It's not existing. If you take a look on schedule page 63, which have every road in the region, I'm just concerned because I know my road has asked for the 100 kilometre to be changed to 80 before, but then I see on that schedule, it's not there at all.
right. Well, that might be something to definitely put through the consultation part,
Because I just want that added as well, that was also a request, but it's not even on the schedule, attachment 22.68.2. There is no Matoki Valley Road. So can I please just ask you to take a look there, because I know requests for services have been put in to change that road to 80 now that there are so many more households on that road. Councillor Akuata Brown.
I just want to start by acknowledging the loss of these great rangatira and add my condolences to those whānau as well. Thank you to the Mayor for starting us with that acknowledgement. Thank you so much to the team working in this space, Tina and your crew. It has been information we have had coming across our spaces for some time, but it's timely. I just had a call recently respect to speeding and young people particularly, and I wanted to know within our consulting community spaces whether having students from the Against Drug Dangerous Driving forum space, could be involved somewhere, just because at the current asking of me to consider how to get programs in place for students who do like to speed and risk take. So I just was following on from a lot of what my colleagues have already said, fellow councillors. It's a big paper, but with the consulting mechanism, I'm really keen about the educative factor in the space. So I wondered if that's, albeit through the hearings in space, just wondered if we connect to certain groups that actually try and work hard to promote safe driving in this space. So that was my question to you, Tina. Kia ora.
Sure. Yeah, we've got an education and promotion part of this of road safety, and so that sits with another team, but they are working to align their message with when we're consulting with this. So and I think they work with, I'm not sure if they touch base with SAD, but we can send like stakeholder letters out to SAD, to groups, if there's a name we can get there from you, and involve them somehow.
Okay, last question from the Councillors' Lounge.
There you go, Bill. Oh. Madam Chair, are you listening?
I am listening.
I just want assurances from whoever goes out to consult that we go to all the communities. We don't skip communities as we have done in the past and take for gospel what they say is what the whole community wants. This is a very contentious issue at home on the broader coast. So we need assurances that we will go to all those communities.
And Your Worship, could I just ask also, Tina, thanks so much for the paper. My queries around our relationship with Waka Kotahi and the influence we can have there. As Her Worship pointed out, we always go straight to our areas that we are most familiar with. And Muriwai has a school on the main road, which currently in this bylaw has an 80k limit going right past the school gates. I'm just wondering how that is going to be worked in the interest of the safety of that community.
Yeah, right. We can only change the speeds on local roads. So State Highway are also planning review at the same time as us. So I've provided a link, I think, in this report to where they update that sort of thing, but I know that it's not there yet. But yeah, they tell me that they're looking to review all of that area.
Right. Thank you.
Last comment, Nadine.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just through yourself, response around the community engagement part. So the community engagement is looking at starting off around April. We are not likely to get to all the communities. I just need to be clear there. We aren't able to get up the State Highway 35 for some time as well. So we'll be using as many mechanisms as we can to reach those communities, but it'll be really good for councillors in the remote area, and our rural councils in particular, if we can connect them with you to help get some information out to the communities.
Thank you for that. Okay, so this is on page 48. Adopts the draft statement of proposal, including the draft changes to speed limit bylaw 2013 for consultation. So this is us saying, yes, let's go and talk to our communities. I have a mover in Councillor Dowsing, a seconder in Councillor Wharehinga. All in favour, hands up. Contrary, carried. Thank you. Thank you, Tina, for a very good paper. Okay, councillors, we move on to page 139. This is a reinstatement of access to the bush intake above the Te Arai landslide. Dr. Cave, are you going to speak to this?
Well, I'm hoping that people have actually read through the report and just take questions. Otherwise, I'll be here a while.
Absolutely, we can do that. Councillors, any questions? Councillor Dowsing, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, just wondering how the engineering design for the repair looks after all of this heavy rain event. Is it still the sensible option? Has there been any apparent additional loss of land from this rain? And are you confident it's a reasonable long-term solution?
Yes, thank you. We have had some significant changes. The small lake is presently gone. We've lost some totara tree, which was actually holding back the landslide. And so essentially we now have a river again, but we have on one side an unstable bank with some trees on it. And on the other side, we now have a very, very steep toe to the landslide. And we would expect that landslide to keep on moving and growing. And so a bridge is really the only option. Otherwise, if we could actually have a track going up the riverbed, which is what we'd have to do otherwise, there are obviously some consenting issues there about using the river as a watercourse. There will be vulnerable to landsliding at any time. So a safer option is really required.
Yeah, so I'm happy with I'm happy to move that we approve the budget, and access is essential. So thanks for the paper.
Okay. Councillor Burdett.
Sorry, Councillor Faulkner, Your Worship. Happy to second the paper. Thanks so much, Dr. Cave, for this. It's good common sense. It's what we need more of.
Thank you. Councillor Warsnop.
Thank you. My question was just around how we know how big the bridge needs to be. Obviously, the engineering people will have looked into that, but because we are preempting what is likely to be an outcome with regards to how much of that landslide ends up damming the river, what risk is there that the water level actually extends beyond what the 25-metre span or whatever it is that we've got budgeted? Yeah, that was the only thing I wondered, because I know we obviously will have probably no certainty with regards to exactly how much or how little the landslide will contribute in terms of the lake that it's trying to make.
Well, I've done initial flood spread modelling, and my assessment is that the position that we're looking at putting the bridge is the appropriate one. We've actually allowed additional space with that 24-metre span so that we don't actually have an abutment that would be in the creek bed right next door to the edge of a new lake if another one forms, well, is likely to form. But we go a wee bit further so that rather than going onto the river bank, we actually extend the bridge pretty much all the way through to where the track is quite well beyond the likely lake when it reforms, which it will do. And the other thing about it with respect to capacity is that we initially looked at a 10-ton load, but then when the discussions internally, the cost difference between the 10-ton load bridge and one with twice the capacity of that was not that significant. So we went for the bigger, more robust design. And essentially, that it is the best option. We will reassess the exact position of where we were planning to put the bridge. We may relocate it slightly to, for example, it could go onto the other side of the pipeline itself. But my view was that having the bridge in the position we were looking at putting it, right next door to the pipeline, in actual fact affords some protection to the pipeline if the landslide gets a wee bit bigger. So we've actually got a structure in the place if anything gets a wee bit bigger, but we wouldn't anticipate the landslide getting as far as the pipeline at this stage. Doesn't look like that's going to be possible. We do have the GNS landslide response team arriving on Monday. They're here for 2 to 3 days, and we'll have them up at Arai doing an assessment as well, probably on Tuesday, and doing an overflight at the same time.
Oh, thank you.
Councillor Cranston and then Akuata Brown.
Yeah, thanks for that, Dr. Cave. Probably that assessment that you've got coming up is going to be about, we spoke about investigations to dewater the slope. Is that part of that investigation, or is that off the table now?
The dewatering of the slope, we had a hui on site with Patamaru Station, and the key area where there was a dewatering issue, which was a stock pond, which gets feed from a spring. Immediately above the landslide, they have agreed that they will divert water from that stock pond and spring through onto the adjacent slope away from the landslide. And so I noticed that they've actually, just before the last weather event, that had actually started working on that, but they haven't got it completed.
Thank you.
Okay, last question, Councillor Akuata Brown.
Thank you, Member Chair. Thank you, Mr. Cave, for the report and all those involved. Just in point 22 on page, page 146, is it? It notes that there was no, let me get to the point. No provision for this expenditure was made in the long-term plan as the landslide could not have been anticipated. So I'm just wondering whether, with regard to funding provisions based on current, obviously, the issues that we've had recent days, but long-term thinking around a fund to consider, I guess, all the constant NIWA projections to climate change impacts to the coast. So I'm really asking is, because we've had no provision for this expenditure, but we need it right now to do what needs to be done right now, in our long-term space, should we have a fund that is there constantly for the needs like this one has presented?
It would always be a good idea. I am in discussion with Auckland University to actually put a graduate level student in to actually do a risk assessment for the entire valley, that entire slope extending upstream. We used to have a science budget that we could actually, on a urgent basis, allocate for things like this. And we do actually have access to funding through a thing called EnviroLink, but that this work would not be consistent with the rules around that. So at this stage, we don't have internal funding for doing any long-term work on this sort of problem.
Thank you, Nadine.
Thank you, through your worship. I think this is part, so as we encounter more of these frequent adverse events, being prepared that there are going to be damage, there's likely to be damage to our assets. Some of this will be covered under, so if you're looking at your roading infrastructure, will be covered under your emergency works. And for your assets, depending on the remedial actions that's required, the group controller could direct resources to fix. Ultimately, the cost will come back to council. And I think it's part of the longer term thinking that needs to happen in the resilience space and where our assets are at, and some of the further information to come that Dr. Cave was talking about will also help us get an understanding of what we need to do to address or adapt or mitigate any future issues around adverse events. What I also can say is that if we're particularly thinking about our Three Waters assets, as you know, we're still, and there's a paper on the agenda anyway, so in this particular one, it's noted in section 24 of the report that this will be debt funded, and that debt will be carried across when the assets transfer over to the new entity. So whether or not the council will end up paying back for that by way of rates contribution into the water entity is yet to be seen. But yeah, and we will look at and consider what's required to address any other issues with our assets once we get further information from the science team.
Thank you for that. Last question, Councillor Seymour, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cave, and others to the paper. My question really is, and I note that the paper says on at point 21 that climate change is not considered to be an implication in this particular failure. My question really probably is to Mr. Wilson. If this is an access road, are we able to get any support from NZTA for our regular funding? No, thank you.
No, through your worship, it's a private access track. It's not a public road. We can't get funding for it.
Thank you, much appreciated. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you for that, Dr. Cave, for interesting paper, and I agree with what councillors have said. We need to address this, and thank you for bringing the numbers, the advantages and disadvantages to us to consider. I have a mover in Councillor Dowsing, a seconder in Councillor Faulkner. All in favour, hands up. Contrary, carried. Thank you. Okay, we're moving well, councillors. I'm impressed by you. Let us move on to our next paper, which is in regards to the election. So you will note there that some of those still have information that will be determined by the electoral outcome on the 10th of April. So that's just preliminary in there. Thank you, Mrs. Khan. I'll pass over to you to give us a quick chat, and then we will talk about how the names go on our ballots. Thank you.
Through you, Your Worship, I'll take the paper as read, and this is the triennial decision that comes around every 3 years regarding how names appear on the ballot paper.
Okay, Councillor Wharehinga and then Councillor Gregory.
Good, Your Worship. I'm happy to move this paper and move alphabetical order. I think it makes sense for people being able to find the person they're trying to vote for. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't really have too much of a substantial difference, but yeah, and for user friendliness, I'm happy to move 1A.
Thank you, Councillor Gregory.
Sorry, will second that. I agree with the name alphabetical order. It seems to work just as well as the others. And I just wondered if there was extra cost involved with doing it with that random or the pseudo random or whatever.
No extra cost. It's all done in the background on the computer election service.
Okay, thank you. But I'm happy to second it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cranston and then Robinson and then Ubus.
Yeah, no, I was actually going to move 1C, but yeah, I see we've got mover already. I just found that the random order that we had last time, it did just shuffle it about every time. So, you know, there was no perceived advantage to being Andy Cranston or Wilson, whatever. So I just thought from a fair and perspective, yeah, just seemed that there was more acceptance of that as a fairer system.
Thank you. Councillor Robinson, used Dowsing.
I support the system that was implemented last time. In other words, every paper was randomly ordered. There has been studies showing that clearly show that alphabetical listing of names actually do favour, and that people's attention span can wane by the end. So Wharehinga may not be so good. Josh. So no, I definitely support the randomised setup we had last time.
Thank you. Councillor Hughes.
I support 1C as well, should the initial motion fail.
Okay. Shannon, and then Larry, and then Terry.
Yeah, I was in support of 1C as well, so I'll second whoever moved that. I think it was Andy. If the first option is to fail.
Thank you, Larry.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, no, I'm the same. I would go for 1C. Random order. It was the same as last time, and that just makes sense. There's no anomalies. So, yeah.
Terry.
I support 1C.
Cool. James.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just through the chair, I just wanted to point out that at the last election, council had pseudo-random. So what that means is that we end up going fully random. Heather, the paper says pseudo.
Yeah, no, we're
fully random. Oh, I apologise.
Okay. Okay, so we've got a clear indication here that we're going to have a voting fest on voting.
I'm happy to, like, if the majority are going for 1C, for me, I don't really. I'm not really too fussed
as well. So to me, should we put it, see if it fails, and then we do have a second one on the table. So I have 1A. Would you want to?
I'm happy to just pull it, Your Worship.
Okay, thanks. Withdraw. I've got a mover in Councillor Cranston and a seconder in Councillor Dowsing, and this is for 1C. And hands up, please. Against? Thank you, carried. Thank you, Heather. Thank you, James. Councillors, we are on fire today. Let's move on to page 169. And that is, Nadine, thank you for your extensive report. It's always good to read what goes on. I know there's so much going on. So before we dig into this, I am just going to quickly do a 1-minute chat with all councillors and just want to acknowledge Nadine and her teams in the last 8 days. They do a good job anyway, but what I have seen in the last 8 days have been teams that work around the clock, 24/7, 7 days a week, tagging in, tagging out. I was just looking at my diary. Looking at our meeting number 21 in the last, to take the gratitude from the councillors towards the civil defence team, let them know that we are really grateful for the work that they do on our region's behalf. We know it has been tough. We know this is ongoing, and we know that you have the best of our region front of mind and wanting to support as many people to get back to their business, to do most of their business, to get their stock to market, get their kids to school, get their houses cleaned up. So thank you so much for the work that has happened. We really, really appreciate that. And we do want to ask you just to extend our thanks to the ECC team. I've done it a few times at the meetings, but I just publicly wanted to acknowledge it's been a very, very taxing, tough time on all our teams. And I am asking the public as well that might have other concerns at this stage, that there might be a slight delay in getting to stuff that are not absolutely immediate and urgent at this stage, because we are still scrambling to get food to people up the Waimata Valley, connecting everyone back, getting our Mangahauini bridge back connected up. So please be patient. Our teams are working as hard as they can. So Nadine, I'm going to take this report as read, and I am going to open up to councillors who might have a few questions of you. Councillor Foster.
Yeah, thank you. Just to page 190 to start with, Pānuku to Titarangi Summit. I see there's been resource consent and there's been several submissions put in, and now the application is on hold. I just want to make sure that it's not going to be too much of a delay, and if the submissions were in opposition or in approval of the consent. That's my first question. I've got another one on the same page after.
Through you, Madam Chair. We had a mix of submissions. We're just working through some of those, and we'll be able to report back to council once we've worked through some of the details. A part of the reason for the consent to be on hold is not because of the submissions we received, but more because of the additional detail that was required. So we are working through creating an operations management plan and traffic management plan to support the issuing of a consent.
Okay, all right. Thank you for that. And the other question I've got is on the same page, is at the bottom. It's the science team are continuing the development of a groundwater model for the Poverty Bay Flats aquifers. The development of the model has involved input from iwi and councillors, which we've done already, and there are workshops scheduled for April to discuss the initial results of the model. So I'm just, are these workshops still going to be in progress for this month or next month? Because this is an important
So, kia ora
topic at the
tātou
moment.
through you, Chair. Apologies. Yeah, apologies, my video isn't working, but yes, those workshops are still going ahead and you'll be receiving your workshop reports in due course. But most of the information will be presented by presentation at the workshop because they're still tweaking the model. Thank you.
Right. Well, we'll be in person by then, hopefully, won't we?
Through you, Chair, we will see what the fates bring us. We'd rather be in person, but if we have to be in this online format, we will.
Okay, we go to the Councillor Burdett and Councillor Faulkner, and then Councillor Warsnop.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to reinforce your remarks regarding the CEO and the staff, which is inclusive of David. I've seen it firsthand, the work that they've put in, as you say, over the last 6 to 8 days. I was back here in Gisborne talking to David last Friday, in Toko as a result of a phone call on Saturday night from Nadine, and back here today. All in all, listening and observing, they've done a marvellous job. I just, in terms of this report, I'm quite happy to move it. I do have a couple of questions I wanted to ask, but I'll leave that for at your discretion.
Thank you. Councillor Warsnop.
Thank you. I will support what Councillor Burdett was saying just with regards to staff and contractors going over and above. Really, a lot of people have had service over and above what they would expect, just given the sheer volume of demand on the whole network. People have been really, really complimentary of the efforts that that council have gone to, and I want to mention Donna in particular from my experience at least. So yeah, really appreciate all that work. I know there's a lot to come, but just it is being noticed by the community and they are talking about it. So just with regards to the paper itself, I had a question and a comment. So the question was just on page 177, where we talk about the freedom camping, government changes to the Freedom Camping Act, and that it is extending to Waka Kotahi and Linz, and whether what that means for our bylaw. Does that mean we need to do another review of our bylaw? Yeah, that was a question I had, and if I've just got something I want to raise after that, if I can get this one answered first.
So through you, Chair, we don't need to do another review of our bylaw unless we wanted to add in additional areas for freedom camping. There's default provisions that will apply regardless of whether we review our bylaw or not.
Okay, cool, thank God. The other point just on page 178, where it is raised with regards to the pricing of agricultural sector emissions. I just want to highlight, I suppose, for everyone else's benefit who possibly isn't in the rural sector, just the fact that the pricing implications, while they're not known in specific terms, for most people in the region, it will be in the region of tens of thousands of dollars ultimately by 2030 for each farming business, the way it's currently proposed, unless you have significant areas of eligible plantings. And there are massive areas in this region that have been deemed ineligible. So when you add that to the paper that is coming after this, it puts a lot of additional pressure on the likelihood of farming businesses being sustained in the long run. So in my opinion, this agricultural pricing emissions has been set up to particularly disadvantage farm systems like the ones that exist in this region, and is much more favourable to more intensive farming and dairy farming, where they run a system that is more productive technically, but not necessarily as easy on the environment as ours try to be. So yeah, I just want to highlight that because it's extremely topical at the moment, and submissions on that close today. So thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Seymour and then Councillor Arkwhite-Brown.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to note that the connection is really poor, and so I do only hear 50% of what's being said as it's raining still on the coast. So I just want to endorse the work of our the comments and praise of our civil defence teams across the region, and particularly the work that's been going on in our townships. Just in reference to the Freedom Camping paper, there are 2 abandoned campsites at Puawa, and they've been abandoned. Should be noted because one in particular's rubbish is being blown around, and I think we do need more information around the comments just made by Councillor Worsnop, because the agricultural sector is one of the key one of the key incomes for this whole region, and if that is non-viable, then it is going to have a huge impact on the region. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you for that, Councillor Seymour.
Sorry,
Councillor
what was Pat's
Arkwhite-Brown.
last comment? I cut out. What was Pat's last comment about a big earner for the region? Could you please repeat that?
The agricultural sector is a big earner for the region, and if there is further disadvantage, it will have an impact on the region. That's all, Tony, a general comment around the potential impact to the region's economy.
Thank you,
Councillor
Madam Chair.
Arkwhite-Brown.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess following on, and again, thank you, Nadine, and all the updates that we've received throughout this time of civil emergency, etc. And I just, with regard to the page I'm looking at speaking to questions-wise, page 185 is around health and safety, and just again, for all our staff managing all of these spaces, just was interested to know how people were doing respect to health and safety. How is everybody as far as time and space and wellness for those that are working in the space? Because I know that we have had a strong focus on COVID-19 as a key factor with regard to approaching health and safety. So we've had a lot of civil defence people out and about in community. So I was just interested to know how people were doing.
Kia ora, thanks, through your worship, thanks, Councillor Arkwhite-Brown. I think it's fair to say that, with the adverse, the state of emergency, kind of was on top of already what we've been talking about is quite a fatigued workforce, and we saw that in our previous discussions also around the people aren't themselves at this current state of time. There's a lot more aggression has been shown to staff when we reported. People are at this stage, we're just trying to get through, but I think that we have put a lot of focus on our staff wellbeing, reaching out, talking a bit more around strategies that you can use to cope and resilience, and what it means to kind of recognise where you're currently sitting and how you're feeling, and managing your space and talking and reaching out to others around you. So that is a big focus for us, and we do know that our staff are under pressure, and then and then they've been working tirelessly over the last 7 days, because it does impact all across the organisation in terms of civil defence. There is a core, and they've been working relentlessly, and they need a really good break. And then there's the others that have wrapped around and provided the support and kept the lights going while we're responding to the emergency events. So yeah, staff wellbeing is top of our mind, in my mind, as we are in these very challenging and difficult times. So thank you for asking.
Okay, councillors, I see no more hands up. I have a mover, Councillor Burdett. I'll second this paper. Thank you, Nadine, for keeping us updated. All in favour, hands up. Contrary, carried. So councillors, we are now going to break. I'm just quickly going to attend a civil defence meeting for 15 minutes. So let's come back 10:15. Is that good? Have a coffee, have a break. We will see you 10:15. Okay, councillors, we move to page 199, and this is the paper in regards to the permanent carbon farming in Tairawhiti. Tim, thank you for a very interesting paper. It is a noting paper, councillors, but I'm sure there might be some questions or queries. So, Tim, do you want to make any comments before we dig into this, or do you just want us to take it as read and shoot out the questions?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, I'm just happy to take it as read, and we have a few staff online, so hopefully we can try and juggle the questions between us. But
awesome. Thank you for that. Okay, councillors, are there any questions or queries or questions you have of the authors or of staff? It's just pulling together a lot of information. It made for very interesting reading. Councillor Worsnop and then Akuhata Brown. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to congratulate, in particular, I think Jo and probably her team for what is a really good report that does a very good job of presenting the complexity that is in this issue. And I appreciate the work that you guys have done to build relationships across all the different interests, because this is an issue that has really, really diverse views coming from all different quarters. I appreciate that it's probably incredibly difficult balancing all that. So just, yeah, my compliments really on a good report and on a what seems to be quite a balanced response, acknowledging that complexity, the risks and opportunities. So yeah, I think the only point I would make is to possibly, I'm not sure where or how it happens, but to connect the implications of this work stream with the implications of the agricultural pricing of emissions, because they will work in tandem to bring about possibly quite dramatic change in a reasonably short space of time, probably less than 10 years. So that would be my only point. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Worsnop. Councillor Akuhata Brown.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question in respect to this report is just based on point number 6, the primary drivers of permanent carbon farming are legislation and policy settings at the national level. And I was just interested to know with regard to the local level, because with all due respect to lots of central legislation policy coming out of central government, we who live in our region and, again, pine planting was a government directive, if you like. So I'm just really concerned that we often have this central government legislative lead. So I was wondering what the localised feel was, if that's answerable. Sorry, Tim.
Through you, Chair, I will attempt to answer that one. So I guess that's part of what this paper is all about. We have these national policy settings, but they have regional implications and they vary from region to region. There has been strong interest from a variety of groups across the region, as Councillor Worsnop was noting, in this interest. This submission process on the proposed settings to the ETS is one way for you to put your local voice across and the voice of Tairawhiti. Rau Tipu Rau Ora governance group are also considering this issue, and I believe that they're looking to have some government officials present to them in the near future on this kaupapa, although with recent events, I'm not sure how those arrangements are going. And there are more changes being considered by central government as well. And of course, you'll have further opportunities to represent the views of Tairawhiti and Council.
Thank you, Joanna. Appreciate it.
Councillor Seymour.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the report. I want to endorse the comments of Councillor Worsnop, and I think just in layman's terms to Councillor Akara Brown's question, that the issue is that this is directed at a national level, and we are needing to, or the world at large is needing to fit into these national directives, and so it is really important that we make feedback as to what the implications are for our region. And the fact that they're not stable recommendations, they change frequently, and there is further change happening. So thank you very much for the paper, and it behoves us all to be alert to the implications of it.
Thank you for that, and thank you for the questions, councillors. Tim and Joe, thank you very much. Keep us informed. This was a very good paper to read, just to make sure we're up to speed. I'm happy to move this paper. Do I have a seconder?
Second.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Seymour. All in favour, hands up, please. Contrary. Carried. Thanks a lot. Thank you, Tim. Okay, councillors, we move to the paper. We're going to skip the Rotipura paper because we're going to do that 11:15. So I'm going to take us straight into the Three Waters paper, and I'm just going to hand over to Nadine, because she will introduce Yvette as our program coordinator manager. Thank you, Nadine.
Kia ora no tātou. So just, I'm going to hand over to Yvette to respond to some of the questions that may come up, but Yvette has been, as our consultant, engaged on our special project. So she'll be working alongside me to provide oversight and coordination around the Three Waters and the transition there. Among other things will be the trifecta review for emergency management. So some in the future for local government, so kind of providing some advice to council on these key pieces of reform programs is where we need a lot of support. So Yvette is coming to us under her consultancy, but many of you will also know Yvette from previously being at council and one of our superstar policy advisors and managers in this space. So you've got the report in front of you. What it does is bring together some of the comments from that we provided to central government when they first put out their proposal, and then the implications of the Three Waters Governance Working Group, who worked within a particular confined scope as well as they made their recommendations to the Minister. So I'll hand over to Yvette if there's anything else you want to raise, Yvette.
Oh, kia ora. Kia ora tātou. He mihi mahana ki a koutou. He wā roa kua kore au e kitea i a koutou, i etahi o koutou. And ka pai ki te mahi i ki te taha o taku hoa Nadine. Thank you again, and I'm really pleased to be back working with you again. And it's lovely to see the familiar faces. So I suppose for those that don't know, I'm Yvette Kinsella. I was with the council for a number of years, and in the policy team. So I still I also do some part-time work for Manaaki Tairawhiti as well. So this is my my new passion and my new set of interests, and I'm very excited. It's a really very much a moving feast for local councils, and you guys, I can imagine, have a lot on your plates at the moment. So I'll kick off with just a few words. You've probably read the report, and excuse me if I repeat myself, but I'm not sure exactly what you've been exposed to in this space, because I haven't been with you on this journey to date. So I'll just really briefly overview. You know that the Three Waters reform started in 2017, and on the back of the Havelock North drinking water inquiry. As part of that inquiry, they found a number of issues that the government wanted to address at a national level. This is where this was all formed way back. So it's 5 years now. They started with the taumata Arai stuff and the regulations of drinking water quality in the first instance. So the regulator was established, and now they have turned their mind to, okay, well, now who's going to provide the actual service of delivering drinking water? That is, they put out a draft bill last year, basically, and the working group was established. And I know you've had a session with the chair of the working group to go through some of these, the recommendations that they made in the draft report. And this report really just goes into a little bit more detail on what those specific recommendations are and what are the implications for Te Tairawhiti, both the council, but also the wider community, including our mana whenua and our local communities, like our rural towns. So in a nutshell, the report is focused on not on looking to whether or not we should be looking at alliances with other councils, because government this government has firmly made a call that they are taking an all-in approach to this. In other words, it's now no longer viable to opt out. So they are taking this, as you all know. And the concerns that you raised at a previous meeting largely centred around, from what I can read from the reports, and I'm really happy to be corrected, around representation and what are the local arrangements that we have in our local voice. How do they fare in this under this new regime? The working group has responded to a few of those things within the mandate that it does have, which was to improve and strengthen what the government put out in its draft bill. So that's a really important distinction to make. They had, as Nadine said, quite some parameters in their terms of reference as to what they could address. The key things. So the paper focuses on how is the working group's recommendations better than what the draft bill said the government wanted to do. And there is some improvement in terms of some of the things that the working group is suggesting, and that is around the powers, I suppose you would say, of regional representation. The issue still remains that there is very little avenue for local voices to be heard. This is definitely still sitting at a super regional level, I would call it, which is NTC, for instance, which takes in, and it still takes in the entire east coast of the North Island down through Wellington and the top of the south. So really large area. They have done some things, made some recommendations though around to try and at that super regional level to try and ensure that there is some local voice. The first one is to strengthen the power of the regional representative group, which is the group that would appoint, would set the expectations for the Water Services Board to operate under, and would sort of say what they're expecting in terms of outcomes for our communities across the whole entity area. That group under the working group recommendations would have sub-regional groups established, which would be one vehicle to feed up to the super regional group, and that may be where council would have a more of a voice, and mana whenua as well. So we've got to remember with this as well in terms of the implications for there's 22 councils in Entity C, but there are many more hapu who would be classed as having mana whenua rights within this entity boundary as well. So yeah, there is a lot. This is sort of similar to the way that I've sort of thought about this, is that they are essentially setting up almost a Crown entity, but instead of being the Crown, there is a group of regional leaders, and so there's only 12 minimum, 14 maximum on this board. It was 6 before, so they have grown the number, so there's more chance of representation for mana whenua who take 6 roles, and for local councils who take 6, who get to appoint 6. So yeah, that's kind of, I suppose, it doesn't, none of the other things that you talked about in terms of concerns around stranded costs of delivering services have been addressed in this report, in the working group's report. It was beyond their scope. So many of your concerns are beyond the scope of what they were tasked to look at. With that said, there is a parcel of work that the government is doing, and the next step after this water entities establishment will be establishing an economic regulator for water. And the other thing I wanted to mention too is that through the Better Off package, there may be opportunities to talk to government and request some of those stranded costs be allowed or provided for as part of not being any worse off from these changes. So there are a number of different things that they are doing that may address, but there's some pretty big holes still. And that's pretty much what I wanted to say. I will say it is a true, from the way that it looks, it is a co-governance model. However, I'm not sure how iwi feel about it. I think it's really important to note that iwi in this region have been having their own conversations with groups through iwi Leaders Forum and a number of forum directly with Minister. However, it will be the hapu groups who have not been involved in those discussions, and it does put council in a difficult position with our Local Government Act requirements to, represent and reflect the entire community. And it's going to take some working through, and government's going to have to stipulate quite clearly what it means by co-governance in a lot more detail, for us to have that certainty around how to deal with the diverse interests within Māori community.
Thank you for that, Yvette. Thank you for just giving us the bare bones of what is happening, where we are at. All I want to say is that the levels of bureaucracy added is just eye-watering. All I'm hearing is just us moving further and further away from having any input, any say. When I attend Entity C meetings, I'm with 22 mayors, the Mayor of Wellington, the Mayor, there are so many people wanting to get the best fight for their region. And then, like you say, even though there are 22 mayors there, that does not even start addressing all the iwi and hapu that needs to be part of these discussions. So unfortunately, I still feel strongly that I struggle to see how accountability and local representation are shining through at all with the working group. And I know, like you say, they've had limited scope, what they could incorporate and what they couldn't. So I respect that. But still, I'm still, like I was right at the beginning of this process, concerned that we're going to lose any local input and that we're going to lose local accountability. Anywho, I'm going to open up for Councillor Gregory, Wharehinga, Burdett. Thank you. Thanks, Yvette.
Thank you. Thank you, Yvette, for the report. I too, like Mayor Stoltz, very concerned about how this looks as we move forward. There was no representation from our region on that working group, stopped at Hawke's Bay. And then every issue that we've raised in this report, Yvette notes that not addressed by the working group recommendations, but obviously not in their scope. But some of these things absolutely need addressing, like the Wainaki block. It is peculiar to our region, but definitely we need to know the answers to some of these questions that haven't been answered. That's just my comment. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Wharehinga and then Councillor Burdett.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Coming into today's meeting, I actually only had one goal, which was not to rant about this paper for too long. I absolutely support your concerns. Like they are absolutely valid concerns. And as for myself, as someone who's elected by this community, it frustrates me that this is another example of how things are being moved even further away from us to being able to have influence over them. We've done a lot of work in this Three Waters space, a lot of really good positive work. The thing that I really want to highlight is actually the how infrequent we open our scours now. Once upon, when I first came onto council, we would have a light drizzle and we were opening those scours, all the time. Now like we have 1 in 100 year rain events and it becomes a possibility. We have massive downpours and then it becomes a possibility. We've put in a lot of work, a lot of money, a lot of time and effort of our staff and of our region, huge investment of our ratepayer dollars. I'm equally concerned, Your Worship, about how far these assets, these really important assets to our community, are being moved away from us. Absolutely, just want to echo that. Thank you very much for the paper, Yvette. Thank you for bringing this to us. I'm happy to move the noting of the report as part of our formal part of our meeting. However, I'd much prefer to move something entirely different. But this is just getting moved further and further away from us. So deeply disappointed, actually, Your Worship. Thank you very much.
No, you're good. You're good.
Okay, Bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Like Josh and yourself, I'm really angry about how this is being handled, the arrogance with which both the council and our wider community are being treated. I have some real issues in terms of the directive. More so, I better start again. Thank you for the report, Yvette, and the breakdown this morning. It still leaves far more questions than we've had answers thus far. I guess at the end of the day, rather than rabbit on, I don't know what action we as a council can take, but hey, I would say at the end of the day, when everyone's had the opportunity to speak, we'd be united on this thing. This is the biggest steal from our wider community I've ever experienced. That's me, Madam Chair.
Your Worship, whilst you've got us here, Morena Yvette, nice to see your smiley face. I do not envy you trying to sell this. I really don't. My great objection to all of this, beyond what has already been mentioned by my colleagues, is the fact that there is absolutely no accountability in this whatsoever for the costs attached to creating yet another bureaucracy. We know that this is going to be, well, it's rapidly becoming an empire building situation. The thing that makes me extraordinarily cross in all of this, aside from what's already been mentioned, is the fact that it all stops with the government or the council. The government and the council get their funding from our ratepayers and our taxpayers. There are no costs attached to this whatsoever, which is the height of irresponsibility in my view. We're charged with, top line, prudent expenditure. There's absolutely nothing in here about expenditure whatsoever except the government and the councils. So again, ranting, and I just don't know where and how we can address these concerns.
Thank you for that, Councillor Seymour and Councillor Burdett.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yep.
Thank you very much, Ms. Kinsella, for the paper, and appreciate the content. To the Mayor, I know that you have, and you and I have discussed it, you've had informal conversations with our members of Parliament, but our members of Parliament are elected for our region, and I really do think that it's all very well us going off it ourselves, unless we actually raise this to the highest level, especially the unanswered issues that are significant issues for Tairawhiti. Our small population is going to be out on the end of whatever this water services bill ends up putting into place. And I would like to recommend that we invite the Minister and the MP Mika Whaitiri, both of them, to come to a meeting and we actually sit down and lay out the issues as it is for Tairawhiti. I know that they're part of the government and they probably have their hands partially tied, but at the same time, unless we speak up on behalf of the people that put us around the council table, we are not doing our job to effectively raise the issues as we see them. We can all growl amongst ourselves, but I honestly do think the time has come to ask for them to come to a meeting, and as someone said already, hopefully next month, as in next week, we can meet in one room and actually raise the issues that are concerned to us. If we can't meet in the council chamber, we surely can meet in the Rose Room. I think it is really important, because I'm really concerned, Councillor Burdett's mentioned it, our small communities are going to be worse off because they will have no direct link to advocating for any particular service at all. I mean, think of the feedback we've had just this week over the water in Tipu. And is that going to be made any better by a water services bill that runs right down the whole of the East Coast and Nelson? Of course it's not. So we do need to get directly to members of Parliament, I honestly believe. Thank you, Madam Chair, if you can make that happen.
Thank you, Councillor Seymour. Just to clarify, you are saying we invite Minister Allen and Whaitiri to have a sit down with Council?
I do. I am saying that, and that we share the issues that we've raised and raise with them the issues that we have not been able to get an answer to, because otherwise they are only going to hear what is fed back to them in their caucus. They're not necessarily going to know what the unanswered questions are that Gisborne District Council has raised on behalf of its community.
Good. I have had personal discussions with them, but I see what you're saying. As a council, we want to sit down. That's all good. We will add that to our to-do list. Councillor Foster and then Councillor Worsnop. Thank you.
Yeah, just thank you. Again, welcome, Yvette. Good to see you back. Been working with you a bit in other areas over the time, and fantastic. You'll be a great asset back here. Look, I just want to reiterate everybody else's concerns. The whole thing has just been a debacle, really, because we've had no indication of what benefit this is going to be for our region whatsoever. The asset grab is just basically to add to their debt cap, so that they're their borrowing power, so they can borrow more money. And everyone knows in business that you can't just keep on borrowing money for the sake of borrowing it. And this government seems to be loving this whole scenario. our assets are something that all ratepayers have paid through over 80, 100 years, building up what we've got here. And we have been managing them pretty well, considering our ratepayer base and everything. So,
thank you.
Is that me?
Oh, Larry froze.
You disappeared.
Yeah, no, he just, Larry, you are muted, Larry, because you froze.
It's just ridiculous.
Thank you.
Yeah, so yeah, I'm totally opposed to it, and I'd love to see what benefit this is all going to be for our region. I don't see it at all.
Thank you for that. Okay, Councillor Worsnop and then Councillor Robinson. Thank you.
I just want to point out that any meeting that we might have, I think probably the first thing we need to do quite critically, and I'm very not complimentary of the way the government's gone about this, and Yvette mentioned it, we need to bring iwi to the table with us, because they may not be saying the same thing that we're saying. And if they're not, it is utterly pointless us saying what we're saying if the region is not giving a coherent set of concerns, and we don't have any clue, to my knowledge, really what the details are around their concerns, or even if they have any. So, and add to that, quite frankly, the fact that our iwi partners are far more likely to be listened to in this conversation than we are. So collaborating and having a collective position is probably the first thing we need to achieve, because if we don't have that, we're actually not going to achieve anything. It doesn't matter how many meetings we have.
So, Councillor Worsnop, you will recall when you and I and Dave went to Rotorua, that's when I raised with DIA that, hey, I've spoken to our iwi chairs, I see them a couple of times a week, and you have not reached out to them yet. So I don't know what has happened in that space either. And it is disappointing. Like when I read Yvette's papers saying the government is having their own individual discussions, which is absolutely fine. But if we are one region that they want to talk to, so for us, I agree with you, we need to try and sit down, but I am concerned that the discussions between government and our iwi partners might have been as forthcoming as their discussions with us. So that's something to follow up there.
Yeah,
thank you for raising that.
True. I just highlight the fact that in the South Island, councils are quite dramatically falling out with Ngāi Tahu over their position, and I would really not like to see that happen here. While our stance is very much that we don't think these reforms deliver anything tangibly beneficial to this region, over and above what we can deliver so far as we can see, we don't want to be at the same time lumped into a position that is increasingly looking quite fraught with regards to the organisations that have formed up on the counter side of that. It's a very messy picture just to read the media reports on it. So I think with some urgency, we need to understand better if those conversations have happened. And even if they haven't, there will still be a position that we need to understand.
Kiri, that's something when we were supposed to have a meeting a couple of weeks ago, and that's something I will make sure moving forward in our first face-to-face hui that we will have with our iwi partners, is to make sure that is front of our agenda as well, to get alignment there. Councillor Robinson and then Councillor Sheldrake. Thank you.
Thank you. Look, just following on Kiri's point is that, yes, the conversation no doubt are happening between iwi and government, and we do need to reach out to understand, but not on the basis that we need to be presenting a single voice for this region, because there might be very diverse positions on this. But we need to clearly say to our iwi partners that the door is open and we would love to talk with you about this, but not go with the attitude that they need to tell us or disclose to us. And I'm not overly fundamentally opposed to some of the reforms that have been suggested, because I know that we actually can't address all the things within region that we need to do. We can't afford to pay for it. We can't afford to replace
our 100-year-old cement asbestos water pipes, which stop water getting pumped to the city in a timely fashion, thus incurring water restrictions. So I think we've actually acted really, really responsibly as a council. I think the kōrero and the letter, the report that we put to Minister, the Minister, was it last year we had that Zoom hui? I'm really proud of how we've acted to date. And I just encourage us to sooner rather than later engage with our partners in this dialogue, but not on the presumption that they owe us a conversation. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Sheldrake.
Yeah, thank you. I think Tony's just touched into what I was going to suggest too. What's a realistic time frame to chat with iwi on this? But more so, I don't think it hurts for our council to have an opinion and to say that, this is our stance, to say nothing or just to let it ride, and the likes of Minister Mahuta and that'll just walk over us. And that's what I feel has just been happening.
Thank you for that. Councillor Seymour.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I've heard subsequent comments, but I don't think we should presume that iwi or Apu would want to come to the same meeting as us. We can speak on behalf of our councillor position and the material that we've sent. And if they do want to join us, that's fine. But if they want to continue to have their discussions, I think that's how it should be for the moment until we get to whatever the next stage looks like.
Thank you for that, Councillor Seymour, and I agree. We're not trying to replace iwi's direct interaction with government. I just think it would be good for us to get together and see where we each individually are on this journey that we've had with DIA, and then see, are there any connection points or not? So I think it's very timely to have that discussion, but not implying that that would replace the direct relationships there should be. Councillor Dowsing and then Councillor Akawata-Brown. Thank you.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I'm not entirely sure what further meetings will get us. We've presented our concerns. We've been walked over already, and now there's a transition team in place or coming on board to manage that transition. Essentially we're just going to fight the same fight we've tried once. The council could take a position in opposition, or we could focus on getting the best out of the transition, but we can't be half and half. If we keep fighting against it, then we're not working towards it, and it means that we're diverting our attention into a space which isn't achieving anything for us. We know it's going ahead. Let's work on transition, not on arguing.
If I might just make a comment in regards to that, I agree with what you're saying. The government has made no secret that they are going ahead with this. And right from the beginning, we have highlighted that what is being proposed, or the 4 entities, is not something that we at this stage are comfortable with, and we have given the reasons why not. But what is happening at this stage, even though this work, the transition work, is happening on the side, I still feel very strongly to advocate on behalf of our community to get the best possible deal. And already we have seen some of those numbers change, where they were only going to be 6 representatives. Now there's an allowing for 12 to 14, which at least would give us, there would be some Tairawhiti voice, hopefully then in there a little bit. Lower down. So I hear what you're saying, Councillor Dowsing, but I also feel I will not be doing my job as the Mayor if I do not take our concerns to the government and try and get a better deal happening. And they are listening in some regards, but yes, so I hear what you're saying, but I'm smitten too.
I don't think you do quite. What I'm saying isn't that we give up on those concerns. What I'm saying is that in business, as your working climate changes, you pivot and you adjust and you strategize around the new working environment. You don't continue to butt up against something that you cannot change. What I'm suggesting, as a governance group, our responsibility is to give leadership to the transition now. Our responsibility is to help give guidance to the team that are responsible for making this happen. We've tried to push back against the government. Now let's focus our efforts on getting the best result, and that is our responsibility in the current climate. That's where we can achieve outcomes, and that's where our energy should be best used, I think.
Thank you for that. Okay, I see Councillor Akawata-Brown, your hand is up.
I just had a question for Yvette regarding with regards to this whole process around Te Tiriti's role, because as Councillor Dowsing has allayed to, our position now in moving forward. So in the process of not wanting to butt up and constantly hit this wall of this is going to be the next iteration of changes, we as councils have to work out where we sit and how we progress. But I just wanted to know whether there was I guess solid dialogue regarding Te Tiriti, because we as council of course are constantly being tended to how better our partnership with our treaty partners is, and there's lots of that dialogue happening in the political world, I can see. But I just wondered, Yvette, was that not a main factor contributing to concerns around boundaries, around iwi, hapu's aspirations, etc., and our role as council to be better treaty partners? So was that a consideration in what you are working with in the documentation and meetings?
For sure, the initial bill proposes a co-governance arrangement. My understanding of Te Tiriti o Waitangi is that Hapu signed that bill, and so there is a question on whether super-regional representation is going to actually give effect to Hapu aspirations, which is where I think that a lot of mana whenua will be concerned about. They have a number of recommendations. One of them is that all treaty settlement mechanisms that are in place at the time transferred to the water services entity. So, for instance, the wastewater treatment plant and any agreements that we have around that, that may transfer. It's very tricky to understand what they mean by treaty settlements, whether they mean that something has to be specifically mentioned in a treaty settlement for it to qualify as being a treaty matter, or whether it is any partnership and joint management or co-management arrangement that is in place with an iwi who has settled, if you understand my distinction. Because if it is the second one, we have a number of those. So we have a number of iwi, we have a number of co-management arrangements, we have a whole bunch of stuff happening. So yeah, that's really, they also extended sought to extend the definition of te mana o te wai to include, to be wider and to be a key feature of when considering drinking water provision and water quality, and that the drinking water has its own mauri and its own, and the standard is of that, which is where government was heading anyway. And yeah, that's pretty much where they're sitting on the treaty stuff. A little bit more to be really thought through in that regard. A lot more.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate it. It's an ongoing discussion, and I do echo Councillor Woolsnop's. We don't want mixed messaging as far as us, even in the construct of where we're moving. So thank you, Councillor Dowsing, as well for where are we sitting in this space. But thank you, Madam Mayor, too, for all your thoughts to it.
Okay, do I have a seconder for this paper?
Yeah.
I have a Councillor Sheldrake, thank you. So I have a
Mike through the chair. Is there an opportunity to consider some of this? So I've made some recommendations in the last part of the report, which is going beyond what the working group has proposed to it's doing things which I think can strengthen local voice or have a more of a role for council. And it might seem like small things, but I think they actually could be quite important. So, for instance, at the moment, there is a body corporate that is supposedly, the working group has suggested a body corporate be established, which would consist of all of the entities, all of the councils and mana whenua, and that body corporate would, the body corporate would be the councils, and that would hold the infrastructure, and that would determine ownership. But the only thing that they can really vote on is whether or not the entity is going to be devolved or sold or privatised in any way. One of the suggestions that I sort of have said is to make that body corporate, which has voting rights and every council is represented on it, have some more powers. So the powers to appoint the regional representative group. Because at the moment, the regional representative group kind of appoints itself. So that the owners of the infrastructure appoint the regional representative group. And that the local authorities and mana whenua have input into drafting the first constitution of the water service entities. I'm trying to go beyond this to focus on the transition to what we can, building on Councillor Dowsing's point, and to say, while we want to make it really clear that this isn't supporting, do you also want to make some movements that focus on transition to try and make sure that if this does go ahead, that it's going to have a little bit address more of the points. And it's things like linking the strategic planning of a water services entity in with local council planning through LTPs and asset management plans and infrastructure strategies. And having some formal mechanism to do that so that it is really, really clear. Having some sort of, in setting there is possibility to address a lot of this stuff depending on who sits on the regional representative group, which will deliver the expectations of the councils to the water services entity. And that's things like our sustainable procurement program. So there's opportunities to carry that on and have that embedded through the statement of performance expectations. So there are a whole bunch of little things that I'd like us to sort of think, ask you if you wanted to think about, at least responding with those to ministers.
Yeah, Councillor. So what are you asking of us, Yvette?
So my understanding from what you've said is that you want to continue to advocate for the community that is really raising the issues around representation. That's one of the things that I really hear, and affordability and the concerns around that. What I'm suggesting is that while council may choose to say it objects fundamentally to the movement, the transition is continuing, and they'll have this bill will be notified in June. Do we want to also make further recommendations beyond what the working group has recommended to further state some additional points?
Okay, well, think about that one. Josh.
Yeah, I think that the recommendations that you made in your paper were very interesting to me. However, I would feel like I would really need our council staff's unpacking in regards to what those recommendations would probably mean. I read it to note it. I didn't read it to think about the implementation of the recommendations coming in. And also, if I also think about the points that you had written in there around the different ideas. Again, really great thinking points, but I'd really need to understand from Nadine's point of view about what that will look like in practice, how that would like end up moving forward. So I don't feel like I'm in a position to be able to go yes to this one, no to that one, just yet. But yeah, really good thinking topics.
Nadine.
Through your worship, so I think where we might need to go to, so in terms of a meeting with ministers and to discuss this would be a bit of a smaller workshop discussion where we can just tease out a bit more around the recommendations. I think it's a fine line too between some of the other councils in the entity have been grappling with how far do you go to work constructively, or the other end of it, which is we're holding the position that this is not good for Tairawhiti and therefore we're not going to work, to get towards a representation model that we can hand over hearts out to the community. But I think that we can have I think what we need to do is have a small session that we just tease a little bit more out from what Yvette was saying around the representation issues, and be really clear on the messages that we want to provide to our local ministers, MPs, and then go from there. So we'll just circle back some times to do that once we know when we can meet with them, which might be a couple of weeks yet.
Thank you. And just in response to one of your comments, Nadine, when I had a mayoral workshop a while back, it is, again, timely to remind our community that this is not council bringing or trying to sell this to the community. It should be the government, again, walking alongside communities, telling them that this is, or working with communities. We are also just part of this process, and we are trying our best to make sure our voices are heard and we do get a deal that we are not worse off. But again, just coming back to the comment, we're trying to get our communities on board. It is the government that should get the communities on board, because this is their process and we are just partaking in that process as well. But anywho, so many thoughtful comments. Thanks a lot for everyone contributing today. Yvette, thank you for joining our team. We are privileged to have you work alongside us. Thank you for that. And we did enjoy your paper. It was really good just to pick out the bits and put it in front of us to keep us focused, because this is a journey, like Shannon said as well. This is happening. How we work alongside and make sure we still try and get the best possible deal for Tairawhiti and our residents is centre of mind for all councillors and for everyone around this table. So thank you for supporting us on this journey and helping us alongside Nadine. So councillors, I did have a mover. Let me just focus. Josh moved it. Terry seconded it. All in favour, hands up. Contrary, carried. Thank you. This is end of our agenda. Let me tell you, we are on fire. We are finishing just in time to welcome our Tipu Raura people back. So if people want to take a quick 5-minute break, we will be back 11:15. So if you quickly want to shoot away, we will be logging on 11:15 for our Tipu Raura presentation. Thank you.
Red. Oh.
I am here.
You didn't want to just pass those public excluded minutes?
Well, I've already sent everyone away.
Okay. Yeah.
See you soon.
No.
Okay, good morning. We are back. And it gives me great pleasure to welcome Amo Haere and Harley from Rotipuro Ora here. And I'm sure Selwyn will join us as soon as his... Oh, there he is. Sorry, Selwyn. Kia ora, my friend. Lovely to see you. And thank you for joining our council meeting today. Today is the last time that we will meet via Zoom because we will be moving back into the chambers soon as our civil defence team can settle down a bit, because civil defence is currently in the chambers. So hopefully we will be able to catch up face to face soon. But it is really lovely to have you here. And Amo, like I said, it would just be good, a general overview of where we at, where we are going, just to get councillors up to speed as well. So without further ado, I will hand over to the lovely Rotipuro Ora team.
Kia ora, I mua I tērā Rihet, te wahi ne kahurangi o te Tairawhiti. Wena taku whakamaori o te mea. Nā reira e mihi ana kia koe me ngā kai kaunihera, o tira ngā ringa o te kaunihera. Tēnei te mihi Rotipuro Ora, kia koutou kia tātou. Tangihi o tātou mate e hika, rā mate kei te noho mahana tonu I roto I ngā whakaro, ko tā June Jackson tērā, ko Moana Jackson huki tērā I te ata nei, tai atu huki kia tāwira I te wiki kua tahake nei, me tō mātou mōrehu pāpā ia Dave Collier, kei ahi tradia I tēnei wā. Hoi anō, hui o tātou mate, ngā mate kei roto o te Tairawhiti, me ngā mate kei whenua iwi ke. Rātou kia rātou, tātou e hui nei, I runga I tēnei kaupapa titirawa I te whatu manawa, o ngai tātou e noho ake nei roto te Tairawhiti. Nō reira, te aku rangatira, tēnā koutou, kia ora tātou katoa.
Thank you for that.
Kia ora, tēnā tātou. Harley and I are going to cover the presentation, and I want to thank you, Rehet, and the council for giving us this opportunity. So we have a series of slides. So slides will be available to you as part of sort of the documentation of this presentation. So we're not going to go through the in detail the script in each of those slides, but we will use those slides as a guideline to provide a snapshot. I think our understanding is that off the back of a couple of meetings last year, there was general sort of need, not only with the council, but also the other member organisations of Rotipuro Ora, to present a bit of an overview of Rotipuro Ora, our journey thus far, the purpose of Rotipuro Ora, its organisational structure and arrangements, and key focus areas and priorities. And in those, we will be able to provide, as the Mayor has requested, to emphasise the specific activities that are currently on the agenda of Rotipuro Ora. So just by way of background, our journey began, Rotipuro Ora is really a collective that came about as a consequence of the region needing to develop and implement a regional or Tairawhiti pandemic response and recovery plan. So the membership of Rotipuro Ora was drawn essentially from the member organisations that had been leading a lot of the response work, and also, and that is primarily the Council, Hauora Tairawhiti, Toitu Tairawhiti and Trust Tairawhiti. So they were the original core membership, and then it was recognised that our focus wasn't just on the response to the COVID pandemic, but also to recovery. And so therefore the need to extend the membership of the Rotipuro Ora governance to groups such as Eastland Group Limited and the EIT Tairawhiti campus chairs. So, so that's the governance leadership. That group is, the group is co-chaired by the Mayor and Selwyn. and the group is supported by a management group which comprises the CEs of all the member organisations. They are also, Rautapuro Order is also supported by what we've called operations arms, the business arms of Rautapuro Order, and that's essentially the TEEP, the Tairawhiti Economic Action Plan Steering Group, Manaaki Tairawhiti, a newly established Te Taiao Group, and also the CARE or Regional Skills Leadership Group. So while some of those entities predated Rautapuro Order, the relevance of actually bringing all of those groups under one umbrella is ostensibly to support the response and recovery, but also to look at the longer term development and growth agenda for Tairawhiti. So in mid last year, we secured, or funding was secured by the management group to support the establishment of what we call the Backbone Office, now called the Tuara. And essentially a need was seen for that investment in that type of infrastructure, because Rautapuro Order for the previous sort of 18 months had lived off the goodwill and of the member organisations. So we all recognise that that was taking a toll on those organisations' capacity and capability to, to deal with their own BAU. So it was recognised we needed a sort of a secretariat, a backbone office to ensure that we would be able to support the strategic intent and the work programs of Rautapuro Order. So funding has been secured through an initiative from central government around investing in the alignment around the regional public service sector work programs with regional programs, and also investment was made by local groups, ostensibly the council, Toitu Tairawhiti and Trust Tairawhiti. So we move to the vision for Rautapuro Order. Oh, sorry, no, I'll go back to the kaupapa. The kaupapa of Rautapuro Order, it's got quite a specific remit. It's, as I've said, it was established to prepare and implement the Tairawhiti COVID pandemic response and recovery plan. It also has sought to encourage and support integrated planning and joined up action. So while we've got the TEEP, while we have Manaaki Tairawhiti and Te Taiao Group and the CARE RSLG Group, it is important that there is some mechanism established that enables us to look at the multiple impacts or collective impact that can be achieved by viewing our planning. So with the TEEP plan, for example, there is an environmental element to that. So it's really important that the Taiao Group then has the opportunity to overview the economic development plan and see what contribution it can make, what are the areas of commonality, how we can work together to get better coverage, better leverage, better outcomes. So that's a unique element of the Rautapuro Order operational ethos. We're also not only about joint planning, but also joined up actions, and we're going to go through an example of that later in this presentation, as well as providing some level of comfort and guidance to central government when they're investing in the region, and to ensure that those investments are being tagged to priorities that have been approved by, a regional leadership group that is looking across all of those areas around social, economic, environmental, and workforce development. One of the values, one of the strengths of Rautapura Order is its ability to leverage the skills, the expertise, the networks, and the leadership within our governance group, our management group, and also our operational arms. And part of that leverage is also leveraging established and developing relationships with central government, businesses, and community sectors. So there's a huge wealth in the intelligence and the leadership and the profile and the networks that the Rautapura Order leaders across that governance, management, and operations arms brings to the table in terms of the business of Rautapura Order. Vision, it's I won't dwell on the vision other than to say it just really articulates the simple agenda and purpose of Rautapura Order. We've looked at so when we go to the structure, and we've looked at this before, is so you have the leadership, the governance group, which has, as the diagram describes, the Gisborne District Council Mayor, Tairawhiti iwi chairs, private and community sector chairs. That is the governance. The governance group then has a particular relationship or a specific relationship in terms with government ministers. And so we regularly have two of our local ministers, MPs, Kiritapu Allen and Meka Whaitiri, who attend or contribute to the Rautapura Order meetings. But the group also has the opportunity, as we saw with the pandemic, when the Mayor and Selwyn as co-chairs of Rautapura Order engage with the Minister for Civil Defence, Police, around the bespoke response that Tairawhiti wanted or believed we needed in terms of the establishment of the static checkpoints. So when the need is required to elevate or escalate matters to respective ministers, then that is one of the key advocacy roles of the governance group. At the management level, we have lead public service agency personnel who work with our local CEs and managers to actually join together in terms of investing in and joined up thinking and planning around specific priority areas. And I suppose in terms of what comes to mind immediately is really the establishment of a Takatu hub and the specific response in terms of health and welfare response to Omicron in our area. So there is the opportunity around those joined up leaderships and sharing of insights and resources. The Rautapura Order plan. This is initial. The plan reflects an initial set of priorities with specific milestones or deliverables, but it's also recognised that the plan is a living document. It has a 3-year life cycle. There are opportunities annually to revisit the priorities and, as occurred last year, to reset some of the priority that the Rautapura Order will focus on. So the document was a good guide and certainly essential for providing us with a map in the wake of the initial COVID-19 impact in Tairawhiti. But it also was premised, or the plan was premised on that it should be annually refreshed, recalibrated, so it maintains its relevance to the circumstances and situations as they occur in Tairawhiti. The 4 focus areas are on supporting our whānau and community, getting our economy moving, our environment and workforce. And there is the detail around the outcomes that we're seeking through those focus areas and some of the activity that is occurring in each of those focus areas. So I'm sure that you would have access or had access to the Rotorua Water Plan to be able to familiarise yourselves with the detail in respect to the specific outcomes sought across each of those focus areas, the specific work programs and milestones to be delivered in each of those focus areas. So just going to, talking about the Rotorua Order, the governance group, as we've described, meets every 2 months. The management group meets monthly. The operation groups, of which, as I said, Manaaki Tairawhiti, Tipu, the Taiao group and the Care RSLG are really the engine rooms. That's where a lot of the activity, a lot of the work program exists. And so just by way of, familiarisation or refamiliarisation for most of you, just a bit of a couple of slides on Manaaki Tairawhiti, its membership, its particular focus. Manaaki Tairawhiti were key in terms of identifying the focus areas and priorities around whānau and community. And in respect to a lot of the programs or work streams falling out of that focus area, Manaaki Tairawhiti is leading or co-leading a lot of those initiatives. And we're going to specifically focus on housing later on in the presentation. So that's just, as I said, a bit of an overview of Manaaki Tairawhiti as one of the key engine rooms, operational arms of Rotorua Order. And I'm going to hand it over to Harley now, who's just going to take us through the Care RSLG, the Tipu and the Taiao group, just to give a bit of a background around how they contribute to the activities and implementation of the Rotorua Water Plan.
Thanks, Harley. So yeah, the few slides that I have are basically to highlight the key focus of those 3 engine room groups, and also the reach and membership of each of those groups. So it's really important for the Aotearoa governance group to have these engine rooms too, and for those groups to be connected to community and business sector representatives. So the first one is the Care Regional Skills Leadership Group, formerly known as CARE, which then government decided that it across the country would establish regional skills leadership groups. So our CARE group became that, is playing that role in region. The CARE group is essentially about identifying and supporting better ways of meeting future skills and workforce needs in the region. A lot of focus has been on developing workforce development plans. So we have a plan that was developed and led by Trustees Tairawhiti with a bunch of sector focus areas that you'll see on the screen. There's another additional workforce development plan being developed to focus on, what have we got? The vertical construction, advanced manufacturing and digital and technology. That is due to be finished by the end of June. The KRSLG is also well resourced. So there are 2 workforce advisors that work from the trust, and MB has a number of staff as well supporting the space, and they are priding themselves on being responsive to challenges in region. One example of this is the Tairawhiti Road Transport Program, where it's a highly successful program looking at providing driver license skills for heavy vehicles. It's been very successful over the last 2 years. Funding is running out, and so this has been raised through Kia RCLG up to Rotokawa Ora, and staff across multiple agencies are now looking at how quickly they can find funding for this program to continue, because the funding is going to run out in June. So that's just an example of trying to be responsive to a need. Another example is the Whakatiputanga Ngāhere forestry training program that has been developed by Tūranga Araro. There's been problems with getting it NZQA accredited and led to delays. So again, staff are really pushing hard to try and get that course fast tracked so it can be provided in region, and so our talent doesn't have to go out of region for this very important course. The Tairawhiti Economic Action Plan Operations Group. This is a long-standing group. It's currently going through a review of its priorities, but these are the key, the 4 PO, the vision, and the key priorities that currently exist. Important to mention that this action plan was reviewed kind of just before COVID, but the key aspect of the review was to ensure that the aspirations of iwi in region were reflected in this plan. Previously, there was a Māori economic action plan, and basically a separate TEEP, and then a Māori economic action plan. So it was separate, but now we have an integrated plan. And in terms of that review, there is work underway to hold a future of work event in region to invite ministers to discuss the work that the government's program in this space, and use that to provide an opportunity to review the priorities in our own region's economic action plan. Linked into that, this is a GDC and Trust Tairawhiti partnered project I thought I'd just raise, which is very important, and scoping work is underway to get this just transition and emissions reduction roadmap prepared as a priority. We have the National Emissions Reduction Program coming out in May, so it's a priority to get this this work underway so the region can be responsive to the government's aspirations and intentions. The Tile Group, Te Raupu Tile, is newly established. It has a strong current focus on the nature conservation and jobs for nature projects, which make up a significant government investment in region, and a significant number of there are a significant number of jobs associated with those projects. A key focus for the group is to look at how nature conservation projects like this can be sustainable going forward. And just to highlight that, this is just the page from Rotokawa Ora, just to highlight that this current scope of Te Raupu Tile, there will be discussions about the scope of that, the focus of that group, acknowledging that the tile and its enhancement is quite broad. So it's just nailing down that scope for the future. Amohare, would you like to shall I pass this one on to you? Or you're on mute.
Thank you, Harley. So as I said, the Rautapuro Water Plan is a living document, and last year the governance identified 5 priority areas, which is basically they were catered for in the plan, but it was just the opportunity to give greater emphasis and specific focus for at that stage for the next 12 months to the next couple of years. So those 5 priorities as identified there is local workforce development, aligned to forecast economic opportunities for growth, increasing the supply of affordable housing for whānau and region, improve service and support to address family harm and specifically drug and alcohol addictions, Te Mauri o Te Taiao, restoring the vitality of our natural environment, and the final, or the 5th priority was improving our regional economic infrastructure and technology. So those are the 5 priorities that we're working on. In terms of just the sort of how Rautapuro Water operates, this flow diagram here just describes part of the added value process. So firstly, as we're aware, the Manaaki Tairawhiti led off with the preparation of a housing report. So in November last year, Rautapuro Water asked for an update of the stock take that was taken, I think, in 2019. And off the back of that report presented in November to the Rautapuro Water governance meeting, the Rautapuro Water agreed that there should be an integrated housing strategy developed. So the next stage was basically looking at a reference group or a steering group to lead that, and it was recognised that actually a steering group as well as an operation group already existed. So we basically joined forces or approached the existing groups to take the lead in the development of the integrated regional housing strategy. That group worked on a draft of key themes and priorities, a vision, which they brought back to the Rautapuro governance, who signed it off, and as at the April board meeting, the draft Tairawhiti integrated housing strategy or implementation strategy will be presented to the Rautapuro Water governance for approval. Off the back of that, there will be work around developing the business cases to support the various work streams in that integrated housing strategy. We already know that some investments have already been committed, such as Toitu Tairawhiti have led out and have negotiated investment with central government to progress the work they're doing, which is great. But in other areas of the key focus areas, we will need additional government investment. So the business cases are in support of being able to implement the work programs as advised in the integrated housing implementation strategy. The ongoing role of Rautapuro Water, specifically the governance, is really just to then monitor by way of their meetings, which are held every 2 months. So it's just monitoring progress, and if there are specific issues that are raised that need to be elevated either with CEs of government agencies or ministers, then that's another additional task and responsibility that Rautapuro Water governance takes on board. So this proposal is around recognising that there are a number of people across Tairawhiti, Toitu Tairawhiti, the council, Manaaki Tairawhiti, who are working on elements of housing. And so the notion of pulling together an integrated housing implementation strategy gives the opportunity for everyone to understand what is happening in terms of the broader context of housing, and to then focus on their particular area of expertise or particular interest, but be reassured that other elements of housing are being addressed, and that through this sort of regular feedback loops by way of the Manaaki Tairawhiti Housing Steering Group and Operations Group, as well as the reporting up to Rotoputo Order, people will be able to get regular updates and understand the progress that has been achieved. So the next, these are some of the, so the Mayor asked us to just give an update on where we are with some of the key activities for the next couple of months. So these are items that are on the Rotoputo Order governance meeting agenda for April. So firstly, there's a presentation on the response to proposed new rules for carbon farming of exotic forests in future. And so the process we've undertaken is to convene a meeting with the lead government agency officials so that they can give a briefing to Rotoputo Order governance, management, operations people, and people that have been working in this field. So there'll be a briefing by senior government officials, and then there will be a meeting with the lead ministers to discuss some of the risks that Tairawhiti has identified presenting through these proposed changes, as well as identifying opportunities and probably a positioning around Tairawhiti wanting to work with central government to progress work programs that we have mutual interest in. The other key priorities is around the receipt of the housing delivery strategy for approval. We have the briefing on the Tairawhiti Just Transition and Emissions Reduction Roadmap, proposal for a Tairawhiti food security strategy, and this is aligned to part of the COVID response and recovery, and that's around improving and increasing whānau hapu community resilience around the notions of people, returning back to practices of the past in terms of having their own gardens and communal gardens, as well as protecting food sovereignty and the integrity and quality of the food that is grown in Tairawhiti. So that's going to be a key focus. The addiction, we are receiving a update on the current state of the addiction and family harm in Tairawhiti. So a status on in terms of numbers, what activities are occurring, where are some of the gaps, what are the key priorities we as a region need to focus on, and identify who are the people that are leading those streams of work and how we can support them. And the final part is really the public update on. So one of the commitments of Rotoputo Order was to provide a regular quarterly reports to the Tairawhiti community around how Rotoputo Order was progressing against the deliverables and milestones in its report. That's just a background slide about the tuara. The tuara, as I said, was established late last year at the end of November. It's been in operation for the last 3 to 4 months. We now have Harley, myself, and a team of 3 other staff members who are providing the coordination, administration, support for the Rotoputo Order group its governance, management, and the operations arms. We've identified some of the key priorities at the governance level. At the tuara level, we have a commitment to working with regional public sector leads around the development of a joined up Rau Water regional public sector work program. And we are focused on developing the business cases for the 5 priority areas that the governance had identified last year. The other key element we're working on is really a data framework, which we're going to partner with Trust Tairawhiti and Toitu Tairawhiti to help us track the impact of the work programs, the investments that are all contributing to the implementation and success of Rau Water, the response and recovery plan. So that's the update, Mia. You're on mute.
And there we go. Thank you for the presentation, Amohaere. Thank you, Harley, as well. Much appreciated. I think we can just unshare, then we can see the faces again, and I can see some councillors that might have some questions. So councillors, any questions or queries on this update from Amohaere and Harley? Anything you want clarification on, or any questions that you want to raise? Now is your time. Thank you. Councillor Burdett.
Well, I wasn't going to speak till after, but that's a good presentation and well listened to. However, given the makeup, what responsibilities do the runangas have to their own people, given that this new entity has suddenly emerged and it is looking to be all things to everyone? I mean, they have a very, very comprehensive list there that they're going to get involved with. So where does the iwi authorities and their responsibility to their own people come to?
Thank you, Amo. You are muted, Amo.
Kia ora, Bill. I'll respond in the first part, and I'm sure Selwyn, if he's still online, will respond. So as we identified at the outset, Rau Water comprises of a number of organisations. So the runanga, like the council, are still focused on their respective core business. It's where we can join together to get greater or collective impact, more impact, greater benefits for the community. So we're working together on areas of shared interest that don't detract from the respective partner organisations fulfilling their own respective, responsibilities, obligations to the particular constituencies that they serve. What we find is through this level of this collective leadership, we're able to benefit from, as we saw with COVID. So when we talk about the COVID response, we're very aware of the infrastructure that iwi threw into the mix in terms of providing the welfare support to communities up the coast. So iwi are not distracted from what they need to do in core business, or even in terms of their specific response to their people around COVID. And as we've just recently seen, runanga again actively involved in the support around the civil defence emergency occurring for Tolaga Bay and Tokomaru Bay. So, Bill, it's not a distraction from their bread and butter or their BAU. business as usual stuff. It's just an opportunity to join forces with other key organisations across the region to get better return or to have greater leverage when advocating with government, and to actually ensure we get the benefit shared across the region, rather than individual groups basically doing their own thing, which is great. But if it's in an area that we need impact right across the region, then that's one of the benefits of this type of collective approach.
Your Worship, just while we've got the mic here, if that's all right.
Yeah, perfect.
Morena Amo, thank you very much for your presentation. My question was more around the mechanics of the group. You mentioned a time frame that started with our COVID response, which is effectively nearly 2 years ago now, and you had another year to run. Does that mean that this group is then dissolved at that point? And following on from that, there again, mechanics of it, as stakeholders, I'm guessing that all of the groups would be starting to look for basic annual reporting, money in, money out type things. So just wondering what the plan was for that, plus the timeline. So economics plus the timeline, effectively. Thank you.
Okay. So with the timeline, as I said, the original the original Rotorua Water Response and Recovery Plan had a 3-year horizon. So as you've rightly identified, we're into year 2. It's also been, as you would appreciate, we've had to recalibrate, given that the amount of change and disruption that has occurred over the last 2 years. So there is going to be a constant need for reviewing and recalibrating the plan. And I would imagine that the governance, come to the end of that initial 3-year period, will do an assessment around the value of Rotorua Water in terms of an ongoing role, or an ongoing role. We have, as I identified, secured central government investment for the establishment of the tuara. That funding is for 3 years, so it takes us beyond the 2023 period. It takes us out to 2024. So that's something that we've got investment to support Rotorua Water beyond the 3-year initial time frame. In terms of your last question, are you seeking clarification around the sort of financial reporting of Rotorua Water?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, same as we would expect of Trust Tairawhiti, any of our organisations, yeah?
Okay, so in terms of the specific funding that Rotorua Water itself has received, it's only been the commitment of that central government funding of 1.2 million over 3 years. So that's the sole funding. Everything else in terms of funding that's been leveraged to advance, progress the work programs has actually been directly funded to the groups doing the work. So we're
that's
not
kind of BAU.
Yeah, so we're not a budget holder. Our budget is really just the 1.2 million central government committed for 3-year period, and the only other contributors to that so-called public funding is the 100,000 from the council, 100,000 from the 4 Toitu Tairawhiti iwi, and 100,000 from Trust Tairawhiti. So those are the, so that was the in-region contribution that complemented the 1.2 million central government. So if Rotorua Water is required, and we do have financial reports prepared for the governance at their meetings, our budget holder of that funding is Trotac, and they provide financial reports. So there's no problem with being able to provide financial reporting. But I just wanted to be clear that it's actually a very sort of narrow investment that Rautipuro Water itself receives.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
I just want to clarify a point. I wasn't chucking stones at the Runanganui. In fact, quite the opposite. I've had the opportunity to observe both with the COVID and with the flood, and the flood 6-8 months ago. They've done an outstanding job, those staff. You know, I've seen them there at all hours delivering kai and support. So I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't chucking stones at anyone.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, Bill, and I suppose that is an important question for you as councillors, as I said, and that's why really the drive to establish the tuara, because we've found, and particularly the council, the 4 iwi under the banner Toitu, Trust Tairawhiti and Hauora Tairawhiti, they've been doing a lot of the heavy lifting. A lot of that heavy lifting has come off their own bottom lines, and that's in terms of staff time and effort and use of infrastructure. So that, you know, so it was timely that government started investing in supporting Rautipuro Water to, you know, to oversee this, you know, quite significant work program, because it's certainly, you know, one of the greatest challenges to the group has been people, you know, the ability of people to provide the time to do this work on top of everything else they're doing.
Thank you. Kia ora to the Runanganui.
Okay, we move on to Councillor Warsnop, Dowsing, Foster, and then Nadine, do you want to go first?
Yes, sorry, through your worship, I just wanted to add on to the question about funding and financial reporting, and just to let councillors know we have in place a service contract with Te Runanga or Te Ranganui-a-Kiwa, so that and that's a very high level just in terms of reporting. So like we are now, this is part of that feeding back and accountability mechanism in there. So we've got that through our service level agreement with Trotec.
Thank you for the clarification. Councillor Warsnop, thank you.
Hey, yep, thank you for the presentation. I guess my question is just in light of the local government reform process and some things that Rautipuro Ora has been able to deliver far better than I think had council tried to do it itself, obviously. I just wondered, is Rautipuro Ora feeding into the local government reform feedback? We as a council, what is the, I know everybody at the moment is trying to weigh up who should hold what role in order to deliver the best outcomes for our community. And obviously the need to form Rautipuro Ora would suggest that what we had before wasn't actually fit to deliver a lot of the things that it has delivered. So yeah, just where to from here, I suppose, because we do have a lot of options on the table, not necessarily us, but the government has a lot of options on the table going forward with regards to how things are structured in not only the local government space, but other spaces. So yeah, just where has that conversation come across Rautipuro Ora, or is it yet to, or is it in council's sphere? Where does that sit?
Well, it hasn't been specifically raised, but in the event that it is done, I think like with a number of the work programs, the Rautipuro Water Governance would look to the council to provide some leadership and guidance as to, you know, because obviously the council of all of the Rautipuro Water partners is the most involved and familiar. So they'd certainly look for the guidance, for the leadership, and you know, on the basis that the council would prepare its submission or responses. Those submissions responses would be made available, and Rautipuro Water would be made aware, as has occurred in other areas, and Rautipuro Water would provide a letter of support if that was the agreement of the governance. That doesn't also preclude the individual member groups of Rautipu Rauora making their own submissions. However, we would hope that at least there was an opportunity for us in region to be able to inform each other about our respective positions, try and reach some level of general agreement where we can, but also even if it's just you know, a heads up that one of the member groups might have a different view, and it's letting, say, for example, the council know that, so when none of us are sort of kept on the, or caught on the back foot. So what we're trying to do is try and deal with our internal in-region politics as best as we can, to provide that, you know, that strong sense of joined up, but we also mutually, you know, respect a level of the mana motuhake, the ability of each partnering group to also have their view understood, even if it's not necessarily shared with the collective. So we'll do as much together to recognise where the leadership should come in region, to get all the positions on the table, so across the region we're aware of where everyone sits, try and form a basis around a regional position statement, whether that's in support of, say, council on the local government, but as I said, still reserve the right for those individual member groups to have to share their own view, and an expectation that those views would be shared with the council and other key leadership or leaders in this specific field prior to those being sent to central government.
Thank you. I appreciate the response.
Shannon and then Larry, thank you.
Thank you. First of all, I praise the sort of scope and aspiration of the leadership group in Rautipu Rauora. It's it touches upon a number of subjects that are always assumed to be under control of one or another organisation, and actually no one does reflect those in their core business. So it takes a lot of the heavy lifting of cohesive thought between organisations that wasn't occurring before. My question regarding that, though, is you're not a delivery organisation. You're not. You don't have any function to do that. Are you planning to put in place, and I think back to the Tairawhiti Economic Action Plan, for example, where you had assigned delivery agents for different projects, and in that, would you look to do sort of responsiveness targets for those organisations? You know, how long should it take before council have it on their agenda in front of councillors, for example, if we're the delivery organisation, so that you can measure your progress and we can, you know, see achievement occurring?
Kia ora, Shannon. I'll do the initial response, but Harley certainly, as the integration and operations manager, has certainly been working a lot more on this. As I described, one of our priorities is around the sort of data mapping and tracking performance. So we're working around developing up a set of metrics that enables us to track the progress against all those work streams, but not just in terms of people, you know, tracking people have done X, Y, and Z, but tracking the efficacy, the impact of those particular actions in terms of improving the well-being, the prosperity of people. So we are developing up a framework that actually then will be applied, and this is with the input of all the operations arms that then will be used across the group. But Harley is probably best placed to, you know, develop on my opening comment.
Yeah, I mean, the short answer is yes. I mean, the funding that has been provided locally and through MSD, there is funding to support improved project management and monitoring of progress against priorities and actions. with organisations such as GDC obviously has strong project management methodology and is good at that sort of thing. There are other agencies that sometimes need a bit more support. So yeah, the short answer is yes. We're looking at improving that. It's probably going slightly off your question, but one of the roles of the Reinstatement Tuara is to try and streamline some of this reporting and tracking as well, because we have some duplication of reporting when you look at the different documents. So reporting actions that are in TEEP that are also in Reinstatement Ora. There's some streamlining that we can do. And just, I did want to touch on, and link to that streamlining, it's the comment that Amoharu made about the time that it takes for the chief execs involved in this, in the many regional leadership meetings and things. We're also looking at the overall calendar so that the reporting goes to the right groups and is, and for example, the frequency of meetings is looked at as well. So we've reduced the number of meetings for TEEP and CARE. They're now 2 monthly instead of monthly. It's just to make sure that we're not overkilling in terms of bureaucracy and reporting. So it's a streamlining effort. There's a budget to support it. And as I said, the short answer is yes, we're going to get better at that.
Thank you. Okay, 2 last questions. Larry and then Pat, thank you.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, thank you. Congratulations all involved. It's a fantastic organisation. It's great to see that it's connecting all the other organisations in the community together. So,
Larry, you just need to up your volume, my friend. We can't hear you, Larry.
Not just the next 3 years. So,
oh, I think you froze up, Larry.
connections here.
It's all good now, Larry.
Anyway, my question is, hopefully you'll be about addictions. You talk about addictions in the drug and alcohol. I'm just wondering where gambling addiction fits into that.
Well, that's as I said, one of the reports that's coming to the April Reinstatement Ora governance meeting is a report that's going to be contributed by Hauora Tairawhiti, the Manaki Tairawhiti, and people that are running different addiction rehabilitation programs. So off the back of that, I'm presuming that we will get some analysis or understanding of, wider addictions in terms of gambling, albeit that in our plan we have focused on the drug and alcohol addictions, and there is this even more specific, like for the coast, they've basically identified P. So they've said that's the #1 killer. And that's where we should be focusing. So we will, the report will come up in terms of what is the current state, and then the governance group will have to make those determinations around whether they broaden the scope to beyond drug and alcohol addictions to gambling.
Yeah, right. Okay. Great. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Pat, last question. You wrap it up for us, Pat. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Selwyn and Harley, for a really comprehensive presentation, because it has always interested me on just what actually was, Reinstatement Ora was actually undertaking. Back to the last answer that Harley gave, it does concern me a bit that there looks to me the potential for a use the drug and alcohol issue, which we all know is so bad. We've all known that P is really bad on the coast ranges. If the report that you get can help you to raise the issues with the powers that be that actually enable some actions to happen, that is going to be fantastic. Otherwise, we aren't much further on than we were when we had a couple of different reports under different names going back 5 years ago, our Tairawhiti Economic Action Plan. Really good to see that you've melded it into the work that you're doing. But we just need to then get deliverables out the other end of it, don't we? I mean, you know as well as I do what the issues are.
Yeah, absolutely, Pat. And I mean, the good thing is the report will be able to provide to the governance an overview of exactly, what numbers are we talking about. But it also will describe some of the specific programs and activities that are currently operating, and the efficacies of those programs, as well as identifying those programs that aren't working, that we will need to basically look at, basically taking off the books and looking for alternative measures. So it will be a combination of just giving us the situation in terms of what is the profile of the level of addiction across Tairawhiti, as well as what are some of the initiatives that are currently being run that are actually producing good results, and where are the gaps, and that's and the business case that is developed off, because we know that Hauora Tairawhiti is doing some stuff, we know that Manaaki Tairawhiti is doing some stuff, we know there are community organisations doing stuff, but they don't all know what each other's doing, and at a regional level we've got no understanding of everything that's been done and not been done. And that's where Tipu Rauora comes through in terms of pulling together all of those people to put together one joined up plan, know who is leading in terms of, like, for example, the P rehabilitation program. We know there's a really good marae-based program on the coast that's having some really good results. So that's one activity. What do we need to help scale that up, better resource that? We know there are addiction programs being run in town, and so the report will give us data around the level, the extent of the particular challenge to Tairawhiti, as well as stuff that's happening, stuff that's working, stuff that's not working, and where we need more investment to get things happening faster and for more people.
And it does seem from the credence and the credibility that you've got already with government ministers that hopefully then this structure will enable resources to come that will make some of those programs actually become more widely available, that Rautuparoa might be the mechanism that enables the government to recognise that some of these issues, the food security, any one of them could be followed up. Thank you. Thanks very much, Madam Chair. Thank you for the presentation.
Amor, Harley, Selwyn, thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you for a very insightful presentation, update to all of us. Thank you, councillors, for also taking part in this discussion. Much appreciated. Selwyn, do you want to leave us with words of wisdom before we go to lunch?
Kia ora, Rihet. I'd just like to say it's an and bill. This Tipu Rauora is working on the strengths of our collective. And when Tairawhiti is all on the same waka, there's not another region in the country to touch us. The council is elected and the iwi authorities are all also elected. So we collectively are representing our constituents in our tribal areas, but the iwi also have the responsibility to have the interests of their members that don't reside in Ngāti Porou or Rongo Whakaata or Te Tanga Mahaki or Ngaita Maruhiri. this has been a roller coaster journey, and you know, our discussions with the council on treaty relationships, treaty partnership, the Māori wards, that's all been in this journey. And I just like to thank all of us and our staff and and the people that we represent. At the end of the day, they're the ones that are going to say whether Rau Tipu Rauora has been successful or not. And that's the heart of it. So yeah, I don't know whether they're words of wisdom, Rehet, but yeah.
Oh, it was. Hey, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate that. We are going to break soon. I think we might quickly do our public excluded agenda, and then we are going to break for lunch. So thank you, Amo. Thank you, Selwyn. Thank you, Harley. We'll catch up soon.
Pleasure.
Thank
Kia
you.
ora. Keep safe.
Thank
Kia ora, bye.
you.
Hey, good night.
Okay, councillors, if we can just quickly go, it's just minutes to pass. So if
Madam Chair, I move we go into public excluded.
Thank you, Councillor Seymour, seconded by myself. All in favour, hands up.